They thought I was just another legacy name on the payroll deadweight to be optimized for their shiny new profit margins. When they signed my termination papers, they had no idea they'd just pulled the pin on a compliance bomb buried deep in international contracts worth hundreds of millions. The explosion wouldn't come immediately, which only made them more confident I was powerless. Fatal mistake, because I didn't just leave. I took the keys to $420 million they were so smugly celebrating. My name is Megan Holloway, and for 12 years, I was the invisible guardian of Vanguardus Capital's international compliance operations. 38 years old, single by choice, and utterly devoted to a job that most people didn't even understand existed. Until they needed me. The champagne tasted like battery acid that evening, but I smiled and raised my glass anyway. The 42nd floor conference room had been transformed into what Logan Pierce, our new VP of Operational Excellence, called a celebration space. Gold balloons spelled out 420M against floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline. $420 million, the crown jewel acquisition that would cement Vanguardus Capital's dominance in emerging markets. Historic achievement, Darren Keats, our CEO, proclaimed from his makeshift podium, his voice carrying that particular brand of corporate enthusiasm that never quite reached his eyes. This merger positions us for unprecedented growth across 7 international markets. I watched him work the room, his silver hair catching the overhead lights just right, a detail his personal stylist had undoubtedly calculated. Darren had perfected the art of looking successful, which in our world was often more valuable than actual success. Megan, Sylvia Transton, our chief legal officer, materialized beside me. Her smile stretched thin as plastic wrap. Shouldn't you be mingling? This is partly your victory too. Partly. The word hung between us like a bad smell. I'd spent 18 months navigating the Byzantine compliance requirements across Singapore, Zurich, Tokyo, Dubai, Hong Kong, London, and Sao Paulo. 18 months of 16-hour days, of learning the intricate dance between local regulations and international law, but sure, partly my victory. Just taking it all in, I replied, matching her synthetic warmth. Victor Hale, our CTO, stood in the corner, nursing what looked like water disguised as vodka. He caught my eye and gave the slightest nod. Victor never wasted words or movements. We'd worked together on the technical infrastructure needed for compliance monitoring, and he was one of the few who understood the complexity of what I'd built. Logan Pierce commanded the center of the room, his Harvard MBA practically gleaming from his forehead as he held court with the junior executives. 6 feet 2 inches of aggressive ambition wrapped in a Tom Ford suit. He'd been here exactly 43 days and had already identified significant redundancies in our operational structure. Ladies and gentlemen, Logan's voice cut through the chatter. While we celebrate tonight, let's remember that with great success comes great responsibility. The integration phase will require us to be leaner, more agile. We'll need to optimize our human capital to match our new global footprint. Optimize, lean, agile, the corporate euphemisms for bloodletting. I'd seen this playbook before new management, big acquisition, followed by the inevitable right-sizing. The only question was who and when. I studied the room through the amber lens of my champagne glass. The younger employees clustered together, laughing too loudly, drinking too quickly unconsciously, seeking safety in numbers. The middle managers worked the periphery, practicing their elevator pitches for when the axe started swinging, and the executives, they circled like sharks, already calculating who was expendable. What none of them knew, what they couldn't possibly know, was that I'd seen the preliminary lists. Sylvia had left them on her desk during our compliance review meeting yesterday, carelessly visible beneath a stack of contracts. 17 names, mine wasn't on it, but that meant nothing. The first wave was never the last. Impressive turnout, a voice said beside me. Logan Pierce had approached while I was distracted, up close. His cologne was aggressively masculine, probably something with a name like Conquest or Domination. It's a big moment for the company, I offered neutrally. Indeed, though between us, he leaned in conspiratorially, I think we're celebrating prematurely. The real work starts Monday. Integration is where most mergers fail. The compliance framework is solid, I said. All 7 markets are cleared for operation. He smiled. the kind that didn't involve his eyes. Of course, your, Regulation 52H clearance? Very impressive, though I have to wonder if maintaining such specialized positions is sustainable in our new structure. There it was, the probe, the testing of defenses. It's not just specialized, I replied evenly. It's legally required for our international operations. Everything's negotiable in business. Megan, everything has a workaround. He patted my shoulder, a gesture meant to establish dominance, and moved on to his next target. I watched him go. Calculating. Logan Pierce thought he was a shark in a tank of fish. He had no idea he'd just circled a barracuda. The party droned on. Keats gave another speech. Sylvia proposed a toast to synergy. The cake appeared grocery store sheet cake dressed up with the company logo, because even our celebrations were exercises in cost-cutting. I stayed until exactly 9:30 p.m., shook the required hands, smiled the required smiles, and left. Walking to my car in the underground parking garage, my heels echoed against concrete like a countdown. They thought they were celebrating a beginning. They had no idea they were toasting their own end. 3 days. That's all the time they gave me between the celebration and the execution. The email arrived at 8:45 a.m. on Thursday. Please report to conference room 12B at 9 a.m. for a mandatory meeting, HR department. Conference room 12B. We called it the death room, though never out loud. It was the smallest conference room on the floor, tucked away from the main hallway, with no windows and soundproofing that had been installed after someone's termination got too emotional 5 years ago. The same room where we'd thrown a baby shower for Jennifer from accounting just 2 months earlier. The pink streamers were gone now. I took my time walking there, memorizing the familiar path one last time, the gray carpet with the coffee stain near the water cooler that maintenance never quite got out, the motivational posters that Darren had personally selected synergy over a photo of rowing crew, excellence over a soaring eagle. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. Logan Pierce was already there when I arrived, seated at the head of the small table like he was conducting a board meeting. Beside him sat Paula from HR, a woman whose entire personality could be summed up as procedural compliance. She had a manila folder in front of her, my name visible on the tab. "Megan, please sit," Logan said, gesturing to the chair across from them. The setup was deliberately intimidating them on one side, me on the other, the fluorescent lights harsh and unforgiving. I sat, said nothing, waited. Logan cleared his throat and launched into his prepared speech. "Megan, first, I want to thank you for your 12 years of service to Vanguardist Capital. Your contributions have been noted. Noted, like I was a footnote in a quarterly report. However," he continued, "as you know, the recent merger requires us to reassess our organizational structure. We need to eliminate redundancies and optimize our workforce for maximum efficiency in the new market landscape." Paula pushed the folder toward me. "This is your separation package. We're offering 2 weeks severance per year of service, continued health benefits for 3 months, and a positive reference." I opened the folder, scanning the documents with the same attention I'd given to 1,000-page international compliance agreements. Standard termination agreement, non-disclosure agreement, non-compete clause, and there, buried on page 3, a single line that made my pulse quicken. Employee confirms the complete transfer and termination of all specialized clearances and certifications to Vanguardist Capital. "The decision is effective immediately," Logan said, his tone suggesting he was already mentally on to his next meeting. "We'll need your badge, company laptop, and phone. Security will escort you to your desk to collect personal items." "I see." I kept my voice steady, professional. "And my Regulation 52H clearance." Logan waved dismissively. "Sylvia's team will handle the transition. These certifications are institutional, not personal. Standard procedure." Standard procedure? He had no idea what he was talking about. The 52H wasn't just a certification. It was a personal authorization tied to extensive background checks, biometric data, and a trust framework that had taken 3 years to establish. It couldn't be transitioned any more than you could transition someone's fingerprints. "I'll need to review these documents," I said, pulling the stack toward me. "Of course, but we'll need them signed before you leave the building," Paula interjected. her voice hitting that particular HR tone that suggested empathy while delivering threats. I read every line, every clause, every word. They watched me. Logan checking his phone repeatedly, Paula maintaining her plastic smile. When I reached the clearance transfer line again, I looked up. This line about the clearance transfer, I'll need to consult with my attorney about the legal implications. That's not necessary, Logan said quickly. It's standard language. Nevertheless, I set my pen down. I'll sign everything else, but I need clarification on this specific clause. They exchanged glances. Logan's jaw tightened the first crack in his corporate armor. Megan, he leaned forward, attempting intimacy. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Sign the papers, take your very generous severance, and move on. It's the best outcome for everyone. I signed the papers, every page except one. When I handed the stack back to Paula, she flipped through quickly, then stopped. You didn't initial the clearance transfer clause. No, I said simply. I didn't. You need to. Actually, I don't. I stood up. Unless you're suggesting that my severance is contingent on signing away rights that, according to you, belong to the institution anyway. Logan's face flushed. Don't play games, Megan. I'm not playing anything. I'm being terminated for budget optimization, not for cause. I'm entitled to my severance regardless of whether I sign supplementary clearance documents, unless you'd like to revise the terms of my termination. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Paula looked to Logan for guidance. Logan stared at me, calculating, trying to figure out my angle. Fine, he said finally. Have it your way. Security will escort you out. As I walked to the door, Logan called out, You know this changes nothing, right? The clearance expires with your employment anyway. I turned back, allowing myself the smallest smile. If you really believed that, you wouldn't have needed me to sign anything. The security guard, Marcus, whom I'd known for 8 years, looked apologetic as he walked me to my desk. I packed my things slowly, methodically. A coffee mug from a compliance conference in Geneva, a photo from the company picnic where we'd won the volleyball tournament, 12 years condensed into a banker's box. As we waited for the elevator, Marcus whispered, This is bullshit, Ms. Holloway. Everyone knows it. Thank you, Marcus. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. As they closed behind me, I thought about the line I hadn't signed, about the secret buried in subsection 47.3 of the International Compliance Framework, about the timer that had just started ticking. They thought they'd eliminated a redundancy. They'd actually just armed a bomb. The secret that would destroy them wasn't really a secret at all. It had been sitting in plain sight for 7 years, buried in the labyrinthine language of international banking regulations that nobody except compliance specialists ever actually read. Sitting in my home office that evening, I pulled up my personal copies of the documents, everything I'd legally retained under whistleblower protection statutes. The original Regulation 52H authorization from 2017 filled my screen, its dense legalese as familiar to me as a childhood lullaby. The story began in 2014 before 52H even existed. Vanguardist Capital had been hemorrhaging money trying to break into international markets. Every expansion attempt hit the same wall: local regulatory requirements that demanded on-site compliance officers with specific government clearances. The cost of maintaining separate compliance teams in 7 countries would have killed the expansion before it started. Then came the Monaco Accord of 2016, a landmark international agreement that almost nobody outside our industry knew about. It created a new classification, the Unified Compliance Designation, known as Regulation 52H, after the subsection where it was defined. One person, with the right clearances, could serve as the compliance officer for multiple international jurisdictions simultaneously. The catch: the clearance requirements were insane. Extensive background checks by 7 different governments, biometric registration with international regulatory bodies, 2 years of documented experience in each market, fluency in at least 3 languages. And here was the real kicker: the clearance was non-transferable, non-delegable, and personally tied to the individual, not their employer. I'd been the perfect candidate. My military intelligence background cleared the security requirements. My doctorate in international finance law covered the expertise. 5 years working in European markets before joining Vanguardus gave me the experience. And my grandmother, a Lebanese immigrant, who'd insisted I learn Arabic and French alongside English, had unknowingly gifted me the language requirement. The application process took 18 months. I remember sitting in a windowless room in Zurich at 3:15 a.m., taking the Swiss compliance examination while jet-lagged beyond comprehension. Flying to Singapore 2 days later for biometric registration, the background investigators calling my high school teachers, my college roommates, even my ex-husband, though that conversation probably raised more red flags about him than me. When the clearance finally came through in October 2017, Darren had actually opened champagne. Real champagne. Not the cheap stuff from Thursday's party. "You've just saved us $40 million a year in compliance costs," he'd said, not knowing he was stating the exact dependency that would eventually destroy them. But here's where it got interesting, where their greed had blinded them to the obvious risk. The 52H authorization was built on a trust framework. The international regulatory bodies weren't stupid. They knew the power this clearance granted, so they built in safeguards. The authorization explicitly stated that it remained valid only while the designated individual was actively employed in a compliance capacity by the sponsoring institution. The key word was actively. Most companies would have treated someone holding this clearance like plutonium valuable, but requiring extreme care in handling. They would have read subsection 47.3, which stated that any change in employment status triggered a 72-hour review period, during which all associated international operations must cease pending re-verification. They would have noticed subsection 47.4 if the employment termination was involuntary and the clearance holder hadn't signed a transfer of duties. The review period extended to 6 months minimum, with no guarantee of renewal. I'd sent them the relevant sections 3 times over the years. The first time in 2019 with the subject line, "Critical Compliance Risk, Please Review." Sylvia had responded with "Noted, filing for future reference." The second time in 2021, after a reorganization scare, I'd been more direct, "52H clearance cannot survive involuntary termination risk assessment attached." Logan's predecessor had replied, "Appreciate your diligence. Will ensure proper succession planning." The third and final time was just 6 months ago. When rumors of the merger first started, I'd marked the email high priority, added red flag emojis, used all caps in places that mattered. Without proper transition protocol, terminating the 52H holder will freeze all international operations. Darren himself had responded to that one. "Megan, your position is secure. Stop worrying and focus on the merger compliance." I printed that email now, holding it up to the light like a winning lottery ticket. They'd had every warning, every opportunity to understand what they were playing with, but they'd been so convinced of their own invincibility, so certain that everything and everyone was replaceable, that they'd ignored the one irreplaceable element in their entire international structure. My phone buzzed. A text from Victor Hale. "Heard about today. They're idiots. FYI. Sylvia just asked me to pull your system access remotely. Told her it would take 24 hours due to security protocols. Buy you some time to download anything you need." Victor understood. He'd built the technical infrastructure around my clearance, the systems that verified my biometric data with international regulators every morning at 6 a.m., the encrypted channels that carried my authorization codes to 7 different countries, the redundancies that ensured no single point of failure. Except, of course, for me. I texted back, "No need to download anything. They'll figure it out soon enough." And they would. Probably when the first automated compliance check ran at midnight Singapore time, approximately 10 hours from now, the system would look for my biometric verification, fail to find it, and begin the cascade that would lock down every international transaction. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and opened my laptop to watch the show. My credentials were still active. Thanks to Victor's stalling, I could see the compliance dashboard, all 7 markets showing green status indicators. Singapore active, Zurich active, Tokyo active, Dubai active, Hong Kong active, London active, Sao Paulo active. In 10 hours, they'd all turn red, and there wasn't a thing Logan Pierce, Sylvia Transton, or even Darren Keats could do to stop it. They'd fired the keymaster without realizing they lived in a locked house. The first domino fell at 12:07 a.m. Singapore time. I was still awake, laptop open, watching the compliance dashboard like a countdown to New Year's. The Singapore indicator flickered from green to yellow, held for 30 seconds, then snapped to red. An error message populated the incident log. Biometric verification failed, primary compliance officer not found. Within minutes, the automated escalation began. The system sent alerts to the Singapore office's local management, then to regional oversight, then to Chicago headquarters, all following the protocol I designed to ensure no compliance failure ever went unnoticed. My phone lit up with a text from Victor at 12:23 a.m. Singapore just went dark. Sylvia's calling emergency IT response. They think it's a server issue. Of course they did. It was always its fault until proven otherwise. Zurich followed at 6:15 local time. Just as the Swiss financial markets were opening, the timing couldn't have been worse. 3 major transactions worth $47 million were scheduled to clear that morning, all frozen. By the time I woke at 7 a.m. Chicago time, my former colleagues were in full panic mode. I knew because Victor was providing play-by-play commentary via encrypted messages. 7:45 Logan screaming at it director, demanding to know how one system failure could affect multiple locations. 8:10 Sylvia realized this might be compliance related, pulling all your old files. 8:30 a.m. Someone finally read subsection 47.3. Sylvia just went pale. Tokyo fell during the Chicago lunch hour. The Japanese clients were particularly unhappy. One major technology firm threatened to pull their entire portfolio if trading wasn't restored within 24 hours. I spent my afternoon casually browsing LinkedIn, updating my profile, responding to recruiters who'd somehow already heard about my availability. The corporate intelligence network was faster than any official communication channel. At 2:15 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the conference room extension. Megan. Sylvia's voice was strained, professional mask slipping. We need to discuss your transition. I'm sorry, who is this? I asked pleasantly. It's Sylvia. Sylvia Transton, from Vanguardis. Oh, hello Sylvia. I'm not sure we have anything to discuss. I was terminated yesterday, remember? A pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, probably Logan and Darren hovering over the speakerphone. There's been a misunderstanding, Sylvia continued. We need you to assist with the compliance transition. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure was having a transition plan before terminating your only 52H clearance holder, I replied, which I mentioned in my email from January 15th. Would you like me to forward it to you again? Megan, please. Darren's voice now, taking over the call. Let's be professional about this. I am being professional. That's why I'm referring you to my attorney for any further discussions. Her name is Patricia Winters at Kellerman, Frost & Associates. I believe you know the firm. They handled the Samsung lawsuit against you last year. You hired Patricia Winters. The fear in his voice was delicious. Patricia was known for turning corporate missteps into 8-figure settlements. Have a good afternoon, Darren. I hung up. Dubai went down at 6 p.m. local time. Hong Kong followed an hour later. By evening Chicago time, 5 of 7 international offices were paralyzed. The calls increased in frequency and desperation. Logan tried the aggressive approach. You're in violation of your employment agreement. You have an obligation to ensure smooth transition of duties. Patricia handled that one with a simple email. Mr. Pierce, please identify the specific clause in Ms. Holloway's terminated employment agreement that requires post-termination assistance without compensation. We'll wait. Then came the bargaining. Sylvia offered me a 30-day consulting contract at my previous daily rate. Patricia countered with triple the rate plus a retention bonus. They refused. London fell at midnight UK time, taking with it the European trading desk. One of the London partners, someone I'd worked with for 5 years, sent me a personal email. Megan, whatever they did to you, watching them scramble is the best entertainment we've had in years. Richard from Zurich started a betting pool on how long before Keats gets sacked. By Friday morning, 6 of 7 markets were frozen. Only Sao Paulo remained active. and that was solely because their compliance check was scheduled for the weekend. The financial press had started to notice. "Technical difficulties plague Vanguard's international operations," read the first headline. By noon, it had evolved to "Vanguard's faces regulatory crisis across multiple markets." At 3:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. A courier delivered a formal letter from Vanguard's Capital's board of directors. They were offering immediate reinstatement, a 30% raise, and a written guarantee of employment for 3 years. I had Patricia respond, "Ms. Holloway is considering multiple opportunities at this time. She'll review your offer along with the others she's received." The truth was, I'd already accepted a position with Steinberg Global, Vanguard's biggest competitor. They'd offered me a 40% raise, a signing bonus that would make Logan weep, and most importantly, a board-level commitment that my position was untouchable without 18 months' notice and a fully trained replacement. But Vanguard's didn't need to know that yet. As the sun set on Friday evening, I stood at my window, watching the city lights flicker to life. Somewhere in the Vanguard's tower, executives were probably still in crisis meetings, trying to understand how their perfect merger had turned into a perfect disaster. They'd learn, eventually, that when the Singapore Monetary Authority discovered the compliance breach, they'd initiate a full audit. The Swiss would follow suit. The Japanese were already making noise about revoking licenses. The $420 million merger would become a $420 million albatross. All because they'd thought I was expendable. My phone buzzed with another text from Victor. "Sao Paulo just went red. Complete shutdown achieved. Also, Logan was just escorted out by security. Didn't even get to pack his desk." I smiled, raising my wine glass to the window in a silent toast to karma. Served at exactly the right temperature, ice cold. Saturday morning brought the kind of chaos that would become business school case study material for decades. I knew something had shifted when Patricia called at 8:30 a.m., laughing so hard she could barely speak. "Megan, you need to see the Bloomberg terminal. Vanguard's just hit the front page." The headline was brutal. "Vanguard's Capital suspends all international operations amid compliance crisis." But it was the subheading that twisted the knife. "Sources indicate critical personnel error may cost hundreds of millions." My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the news broke. Reporters, recruiters, former colleagues, everyone wanted to know what had really happened. I ignored them all, except for one text from Marcus, the security guard. "The executive floor looks like a war zone. Never seen so many lawyers in one place." By 10 a.m., the situation had escalated beyond anything I'd anticipated. The Singapore Monetary Authority hadn't just initiated an audit, they'd frozen all of Vanguard's assets in the country pending investigation. When one regulator moves that aggressively, others follow to protect their own markets. Patricia forwarded me an internal email that had been leaked to her by someone inside Vanguard's. It was from Darren to the board, marked "Confidential Attorney-Client Privilege." Board members. The situation has become critical. Our failure to maintain proper compliance authorization has triggered what our legal team describes as a cascade failure across all international operations. Current status: Singapore. Assets frozen. License under review. Zurich. Swiss Financial Market Authority, demanding immediate compliance proof. Tokyo. 3 major clients have invoked breach of contract clauses. Dubai banking privileges suspended. Hong Kong regulatory warning issued. 72 hours to remedy. London UK Financial Conduct Authority investigation initiated. Sao Paulo operations suspended by local management. Conservative estimates place our immediate losses at $80 million, with potential total exposure exceeding $300 million if licenses are revoked. The root cause has been identified: the termination of Megan Holloway without succession planning for her Regulation 52H clearance. Logan Pierce made this decision unilaterally, without consulting legal or understanding the compliance implications. Immediate action required. Logan Pierce, the golden boy with the Harvard MBA, had become the fall guy in less than 48 hours, but the board wasn't stopping there. At 2 p.m., Victor sent a message that made me actually gasp. "Emergency board meeting just ended. Darren's out. Sylvia's out. Complete C-suite restructuring announced for Monday." They were cleaning house, desperately trying to show regulators they were taking this seriously, but it was like trying to bail out the Titanic with a coffee cup. Then came the call I'd been expecting, not from Vanguardis, but from James Morrison, the lead board member. He was old school, the kind of executive who still believed in honor and accountability, a rarity in our industry. "Megan," his gravelly voice was tired. "I'm calling personally, not as a board representative." "Hello, James. I want you to know that I argued against your termination. I've been overruled a lot lately by newer board members who thought they knew better." "I appreciate that. How bad is this going to get?" I considered lying, offering false comfort, but James had always been straight with me. "Without a 52H clearance holder, you're looking at minimum 6 months to restore operations, assuming you can find someone qualified and get them through the approval process. The fines alone will be in the tens of millions. Client losses, incalculable." He sighed. "We've destroyed 12 years of international expansion in 12 hours. 48 hours, I corrected. "It took 48 hours from when you terminated me. Would you consider coming back?" "Name your terms." "James, I've already accepted another position. But even if I hadn't, how could I trust an organization that terminated me 3 days after celebrating my work, that ignored multiple warnings about this exact scenario?" "You can't. You're right." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm resigning from the board effective Monday, 30 years with this company, and this is how it ends." After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected, a twinge of sadness, not for Logan or Darren or Sylvia, but for people like James and Marcus and the hundreds of employees who had nothing to do with the decision but would suffer the consequences. The afternoon brought more revelations. A forensic review of emails revealed that Logan had been planning the redundancy eliminations since his first week. He'd identified 17 positions to cut, with mine at the top of the list as highest salary for non-revenue generating role. He'd never bothered to understand what I actually did. At 5:45 p.m., news broke that made everything else pale in comparison. The merger partner, the source of the celebrated $420 million, had invoked a compliance clause to terminate the deal. Due to Vanguardis's failure to maintain required regulatory standards, they were walking away. The breakup fee alone would cost Vanguardis $50 million. Patricia called immediately. "Megan, they're beyond desperate now. I just received an offer that's unprecedented. Full reinstatement, double your previous salary, C-suite position as Chief Compliance Officer, and this is the kicker, a $5 million signing bonus to return immediately." "Tell them no." "You're sure this is life-changing money?" "It's not about the money anymore, Patricia. They had their chance to value what I brought to the table. They chose not to. Besides, Steinberg Global is about to acquire several major contracts from fleeing Vanguardis clients. I'll make that $5 million in bonuses within 2 years." As darkness fell over Chicago, I finally turned off my phone, closed my laptop, and poured myself a bath. The 48-hour war was over. Vanguardis Capital, the firm that had consumed 12 years of my life, was mortally wounded, not by a competitor, not by market forces, but by their own arrogance. They'd thought I was expendable overhead, a line item to be optimized away. They'd learned, too late, that some things can't be replaced, some expertise can't be replicated, and some people hold keys to kingdoms they don't even know exist. Monday would bring more chaos, more revelations, more desperate attempts to salvage what was left. But that was their problem now. I had a new job to start, a company that understood my value, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice, for once, had been served at exactly the right temperature. Monday morning arrived like a hurricane making landfall. I turned my phone back on at 6 a.m. to find 147 missed calls, 300 emails, and enough text messages to crash a smaller device. The business news was running Vanguardis coverage on a loop. The stock had opened down 32% in pre-market trading. Patricia had sent me a summary of the weekend's developments with a single-word subject line, apocalypse. The Singapore authorities hadn't just frozen assets, they'd launched a criminal investigation into potential regulatory fraud. The Swiss were demanding a complete audit of all transactions for the past 3 years. The Japanese clients weren't just pulling their portfolios. They were organizing a class action lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty. But the email that stopped me cold came from an unexpected source, Logan Pierce himself. Sent at 3:47 a.m., clearly written in a state of desperation or possibly intoxication. Megan. They're destroying me. My face is all over the financial press as the executive who cost the company everything. My wife left me. Harvard Business School is reviewing my guest lecturer position. I'm radioactive. I know I deserve this. I was an arrogant prick who thought I knew everything. I didn't even read your compliance warnings. I just saw your salary and thought, easy target. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to call off the dogs. Please. I stared at the email for a long moment. Some part of me, the human part, felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered how he'd smiled while telling me my position was being eliminated, how he'd called security to escort me out like a criminal, how he'd dismissed my 12 years of work as redundancy. I didn't reply. By 9 a.m., the Vanguardist board had called an emergency shareholders meeting. Someone live-streamed it illegally, and within minutes, it was everywhere. Darren Keats, the silver-haired CEO who'd mastered the art of looking successful, looked like he'd aged a decade in a weekend. His opening statement was brutal in its honesty. We have failed catastrophically in our fiduciary duty to shareholders. A systematic breakdown in communication and decision-making led to the termination of a critical compliance officer without understanding the ramifications. This failure rests entirely with senior management. The shareholders weren't interested in apologies. They wanted blood. How does a $40 billion company not have redundancy for critical positions? One shouted. Who authorized this termination? Demanded another. Why were multiple warnings ignored? The meeting devolved into chaos. Security had to escort several shareholders out. Trading was halted twice due to volatility. By lunch, Vanguardist had lost 48% of its market value. Patricia called at noon with an update that made me laugh out loud. They've hired McKinsey to figure out how to restore operations. McKinsey's first recommendation, hire you back at any cost. They paid millions for consultants to tell them the obvious. The estimate is actually $12 million for the emergency engagement. They're also bringing in 3 other consulting firms. It's a feeding frenzy. Meanwhile, Steinberg Global was having the best Monday in company history. As Vanguardist clients fled, Steinberg was there with open arms and conveniently a new chief international compliance officer who could ensure seamless operations across all markets. Me. My new office was on the 53rd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My assistant, Jerome, had already prepared briefing materials on 17 potential new clients, all former Vanguardist accounts. Ms. Holloway, Jerome said, barely containing his excitement. Mr. Steinberg would like to see you when you have a moment. He said to tell you, the chickens have come home to roost. Robert Steinberg was everything Darren Keats pretended to be: genuinely successful, strategically brilliant, and smart enough to value expertise over ego. He stood when I entered his office, a gesture of respect Darren had never once offered. Megan, I've been in this business 40 years, he said, pouring 2 glasses of actual champagne Krug, not the supermarket variety. I've never seen anything like this. You didn't just burn a bridge, you detonated it from orbit. They lit the fuse, I just didn't blow it out. He laughed, a genuine sound. The Tokyo clients are particularly impressed. Yamamoto Corporation specifically requested you handle their transition. They said, and I quote, anyone who can bring Vanguardist to its knees is someone we want on our side. We spent the afternoon strategizing, not just about absorbing Vanguardist clients, but about preventing anything similar from happening at Steinberg. Robert had already initiated a company-wide audit of critical positions and succession planning. My employment contract had been reviewed by 3 separate legal teams to ensure it was ironclad. At 4:30 p.m., Victor sent his final update from inside Vanguardist. Just submitted my resignation. I'm the 43rd person to quit today. Legal, and compliance are gutted. They're offering 50% salary increases to anyone who stays. But people are literally laughing at the offers. The final nail in Vanguardist's coffin came at 5:15 p.m. The Financial Times published an investigative piece that included internal emails showing Logan had been warned by 3 separate department heads about the compliance risk. He'd responded to one with, I don't have time for hypothetical worst-case scenarios. The article also revealed that Sylvia had tried to retroactively forge my signature on the clearance transfer document after the crisis began. She was now facing potential criminal charges for attempted fraud. As I left my new office that evening, I passed the Vanguardist building. News vans surrounded the entrance. Security guards were escorting employees out with boxes not terminations, but resignations. The empire was collapsing in real time. My phone buzzed with one final message from James Morrison, the board member who'd resigned. Heard you landed at Steinberg. Good for you. Final board meeting transcript shows Logan presented your termination as a cost optimization victory that would save $2.8 million over 3 years. The compliance failures will cost north of $500 million. I believe that's what they call penny-wise, pound foolish. I stood there for a moment, looking up at the tower that had been my professional home for over a decade. Somewhere up there, emergency meetings were continuing. Lawyers were huddled in conference rooms, and executives were watching their careers evaporate. They'd wanted to optimize. They'd wanted to be lean and agile. They'd succeeded. They'd optimized themselves right out of existence. Tuesday morning delivered the killing blow. The Wall Street Journal's headline was almost poetic in its brutality. Vanguardist Capital faces insolvency as international licenses revoked. The article detailed how Singapore, Switzerland, and Japan had simultaneously pulled Vanguardist's operating licenses, effective immediately. Without these licenses, the company couldn't execute trades, manage funds, or even access client accounts in those markets. I was in my new office at Steinberg, reviewing transition documents for our newest clients, when Jerome knocked. Ms. Holloway, you have visitors in conference room A. They said you'd want to see them. Walking in, I found 3 familiar faces: Hannah from Risk Management, Raj from International Trading, and Jennifer from Accounting, the same Jennifer whose baby shower had been held in the room where I was terminated. Megan, Hannah spoke first, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. We wanted you to know what happened at the all-hands meeting this morning. What's left of the all-hands? Raj corrected bitterly. Maybe 60 people showed up out of 300. Jennifer pulled out her phone, showing me a video someone had secretly recorded. The conference room at Vanguardist looked like a disaster zone: empty chairs, demoralized faces, and at the podium, a man I didn't recognize. That's Richard Blackstone, Hannah explained. Emergency CEO, brought in by the board. He lasted exactly 17 minutes. In the video, Blackstone was trying to rally the troops with corporate platitudes about weathering the storm and emerging stronger. Then someone in the audience stood up. I recognized Tom from Fixed Income. With all due respect, Tom's voice carried clearly through the recording. How exactly do we emerge stronger when we can't legally operate in 7 markets? When our best compliance officer was fired for budget optimization? When senior management ignored multiple warnings about this exact scenario? Blackstone stammered something about moving forward, not backward, but the room erupted. People started shouting questions, accusations, demands for accountability. Someone yelled, Logan Pierce destroyed this company for a $2.8 million savings. Another voice, Darren and Sylvia should be in jail. The video cut off as security moved in to restore order. He resigned on the spot, Jennifer said quietly. 17 minutes as CEO. Has to be some kind of record. They'd come to ask if Steinberg was hiring. Of course we were. Robert had given me carte blanche to recruit anyone from Vanguardist I deemed valuable. By lunch, I'd extended offers to all 3, plus 12 other former colleagues who'd reached out. We were building something new from Vanguardist's ashes. At 2 p.m., the news broke that made everything else seem like foreplay. The Department of Justice had opened an investigation into Vanguardist for potential violations of international banking regulations. The FBI had raided their offices that morning, seizing servers and documents. Patricia called immediately. Megan, they're going to want to interview you. You're the key witness to everything that happened. I have nothing to hide. Every warning I sent, every risk assessment I filed, every attempt to prevent this, it's all documented. That's what I'm counting on. By the way, Sylvia Transton was arrested an hour ago. The forged signature was just the tip of the iceberg. Apparently, she's been backdating documents all weekend. trying to create a paper trail that shifts blame away from senior management. As the afternoon wore on, the Vanguard's collapse accelerated beyond anything anyone had imagined. The stock was delisted after falling 91%. Major creditors called in their loans. The merger partner wasn't just walking away, they were suing for damages, claiming Vanguard's had misrepresented their compliance status. At 4:45 p.m., I received an email that made me stop breathing for a moment. It was from the Swiss Financial Market Authority. Ms. Holloway, we are pleased to confirm that your Regulation 52H clearance has been transferred to Steinberg Global, effective immediately. We note that you maintained perfect compliance standards for 7 years, despite operating in an environment of systematic management negligence. We have also received your risk assessment documents from 2019, 2021, and 2024, which accurately predicted the current scenario. These documents are being used as